Hey, everybody. We have a very special two-part episode this week with my good buddy, Corey Savage. He is an African-American pastor, and we just wanted to get a new perspective on what's going on in the U.S. right now. Part 2 will air on Tuesday, so catch that early next week. I think this will be a very beneficial podcast to see some things from another person's eyes who's lived it and been there. And just to help further the conversations that you're having with the people around you. So without further ado, enjoy. Episode 11.
There we go.
And we are here with my good buddy, Corey Savage.
Great last name.
Yeah, great last name. If I had to pick a last name,
Right.
I think that's the name I would pick.
It has its perks, you know.
Is there what's it from? Do you know the...
You know what? I don't know. I know my ancestors, there were 3 brothers. They were fruit salesmen. They came from the Caribbean.
Very savage.
One, yeah, you know. And so one landed in East Mississippi.
Philadelphia.
One in West Alabama, and then one went to up to Michigan, and their last name was Savage. So it's great until you get to elementary school and people see Pocahontas. And they hear that savages. Yeah, that was pretty annoying.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, that was pretty annoying. But
Like maybe you had some Native American in you somewhere along the way.
yeah, I'm pretty sure.
That's where
I'm
it came
pretty
from.
sure. It might have,
Pretty sure.
but,
That's what
you
gives
know,
you this olive
Then you
glow.
get to middle school and Macho Man Randy Savage is
Right.
popular.
There you go.
And of course he's related to me because I make it so.
Yep.
Because that's what I decided.
Because that's what I have decided.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
As fate would have it, you know, my last name is Savage. So
Yeah.
There you go.
Is there
It is.
anything else that's been through the years, like other than Macho Man, that you were like,
Well, TikTok,
Pocahontas.
right? The Megan
Yeah.
Thee Stallion
Oh, yeah,
song,
I'm a Savage. Yeah.
Being a
so
savage, that's
so you
we
just did a
couldn't really-
TikTok with just I'm a savage
I
over
just
and over.
did a TikTok and just stood there while the song played.
Yeah.
And
'Cause you're
people that
savage.
know me get the context.
like
and so
holding
I
your
don't have to
license in front of the camera
That's
too.
it. That's
By the
it.
way, one of our big things on this podcast is TikToks.
move. Ah,
Begrudgingly,
We find
it's one
the
of the things we do.
grossest TikToks possible.
okay.
It's usually somebody who looks like they're on meth.
Yep.
They've got about 4 teeth between 3 people.
Yeah.
And then it's just whatever they're saying, we
Right.
just like rip them apart.
Yeah.
So
Josh comes up with them and
Yeah.
hides them from me so that he shows them to
Yeah.
me.
In the
It's-
moment.
Off the
yeah,
cuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 It's just his initial reaction. So
Yeah. See, that would get me too because I'm not really into the TikTok thing. Like
Oh, no,
I'll
not
see
at
it
all.
on other social media
yeah,
platforms.
yeah.
And I kind of think of like the social media platforms like age groups, right? So I feel like my parents are on Facebook, so
Yeah.
I want to get off.
Yeah.
Grandparents
And
are
then-
on MySpace.
There you go.
Dang.
And then, you know, I'm kind of in that Twitter age range right now.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
up to the minute information, but it's just not too much.
Yeah.
And then my kids are like
Instagram.
TikTok.
Oh,
Instagram.
yeah.
Yeah. TikTok's
yeah.
a big.
Oh man, TikTok.
The amount of 11-year-olds on Instagram is just like
Well, see, if you move over to TikTok, it's you're gonna
Even
be
younger?
even more surprised. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I would just be so frustrated with it.
Yeah.
That I couldn't use it. That I
Yeah.
end up
I just want to
compromising my
know
witness
where's
in a
all
lot
these
of
people's
ways. I'd be cursing at it.
Yeah. It's hey.
Because you can't
And
get the dance
the way
moves.
that mine's gone now is since I like all this stuff for the podcast to like bring it back up.
Yeah.
That's all my feed is. There's
Yeah.
no like just like funny light videos anymore. It's just
Yeah.
like Bubba just going, "Hey,
eating a can of tuna,
Yeah.
smacking his lips.
Trying to do a Disney voiceover
yeah.
while eating a can.
Exactly. And that's trying to do a
Yeah.
voiceover and just completely botching it is like one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Where they're just like they're mouthing it, but their mouth is way just they don't know the words.
You know the podcast that I was telling you about with the Tom Segura and his wife.
Yeah.
They're like sound guy, and like that guy that puts the videos together had a TikTok for them. And when they started watching it, it was one of those voiceover ones that's
yeah.
really bad. And then the guy was like, I was trying to edit this for an hour, trying to sync it up.
Trying to, like
And
he thought it was
yeah.
off sync, but it was just that
Yeah.
person was
It
just
was
that
so
bad.
funny.
Gosh. But yeah, so
Man,
Corey,
thanks for
please.
having me.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Honestly,
I appreciate the
we're
invitation.
honored to have you.
How long have y'all been friends?
Whew,
So I was
man.
21, I think.
Yeah.
God.
So
old are you now?
I'm 30.
Wow.
20.
I was about to say you're 24, 25.
Oh my
Jeez.
God, I wish.
It's a joke.
This dude
It's a
rips
joke.
on me stinking every episode,
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
like
so
about how
you're
old
30
I am.
now?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I,
yeah, almost a decade.
I almost did it, but when you were in there, I asked him how old he was,
Oh,
and he
yeah.
said he's older than you, and
You
so
didn't want to
yeah.
be disrespectful
Yeah.
to our guest. But me, it's just whatever.
It's whatever, right? Yeah, but almost a decade. So we worked in ministry together at a local church, and now we're both married.
Yeah,
now,
yeah. Recently for me.
Yeah,
but
I got a little skin in the game.
Yeah, you got some kids though.
Married, 3 kids.
Hey.
3.
Yeah, man, 6, 7, and 8.
God.
Yeah, man.
God
It's never a
bless.
dull moment in my
Oh,
house.
I bet. We've got a 5-year-old running around here, and I don't know what I would do with 2 more of those.
Listen. You're gonna.
I'd probably just give up.
You'll be tried by fire very soon, my friend. You will see.
My 10-month-old can't even do anything, and I was just like,
that's a good age though.
Yeah.
10 months is good age. I mean, they can't talk back yet.
Right.
They're sleeping through the night.
oh yeah,
And
they're mobile but not fast.
T-Mobile. That's right.
Yeah.
That's it. That's a sweet spot kind of age right there. But yeah, man, 10 years me and Josh been knowing each other, and life has progressed. I'm youth pastor now and in seminary, and
Oh, where are you in seminary?
I'm at Beeson Divinity School.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm just about to start my second year.
Okay.
Actually, tomorrow, starting Hebrew. So
Dang.
this is a
very
nice
cool.
reprieve. It's a calm before the storm.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
a little break before you get into like the heavy.
Yeah,
Is it
it's about to get
online?
real. Yeah, it is. Beeson is actually doesn't have an online program, but due to the pandemic, they're forced to have to offer some online courses, and so.
Good news for you.
Yeah, man, yes, I'm saving gas money, y'all.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
drive to Birmingham is no joke,
Ooh.
bro. Like
That's where Beeson is in Birmingham.
Yeah, it's in Birmingham. So,
Yeah,
but
that's no bueno.
Nah.
man, it's gonna be good to not have to drive, but
Yeah.
it's gonna
Yeah.
consume my life after
Yeah.
tonight. So
Yeah.
I'll have to listen to the podcast.
Speaking of driving, so we were in ministry, and I remember every day we would like go get lunch.
yes,
And we'd be listening to like
Yes.
Rick Ross or something like
Yes.
that. Like
Yes.
pulling up to the church, just like, should we turn this down a little
Man.
bit?
Speaking of driving
Yeah.
too,
That's what we would always.
the thing that I remember was Josh had this old BMW, right? And he
It beats that Forerunner he had for
man,
forever.
listen, he swore he was in a Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift because when we'd come back, like we'd have a bag full of burgers and fries, getting ready to hop out and eat, and we couldn't just get out without there being fries in the floorboard because he had to do donuts and
In the parking lot.
drift in the church parking lot.
Heck yeah, man.
And it
That's-
was fun.
Hey,
it was fun times.
Gosh, I beat
That makes so much sense now because it doesn't matter what vehicle he's got. He's doing something dumb with it.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
When we went out in the woods and hit that ramp in your Raptor
yeah,
to get a
in my truck.
freaking
Yeah.
video,
I mean, hey, you gotta have fun.
Got it
That's
stuck
what
in that
cars are
creek.
for.
Man, listen, we had some good times in that car right there. Buddy.
We had a
That's
lot
funny.
of naps after we got out of that car.
Oh,
though,
man.
I'm surprised. We would legitimately we would go into the office, we would shut the door, lock the door, and then just turn like one lamp on in the room to make it look like there was some light in
That's
there.
it. That's it.
Bro, we were out.
I remember sometimes, like, you know how when you're asleep and like you're startled by something that wakes you up and you know you're not supposed to be asleep, so you want to do something.
Yeah.
It's almost like when you're in church and you're asleep and that old man in the corner he wakes up, amen.
Yeah.
Amen. It's like Josh will wake up and he just press keys
Yeah,
on
just-
the keyboard just to make it sound like there was movement in the room. And then we'd be like, okay, all clear.
Yeah.
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 And he had this neck pillow, man. It was the plushest neck pillow I had ever seen in my life. Like, it was neck pillow 3000.
Yeah.
I mean,
All right.
it had the vibrator in the back of it. It had
Heat.
It had heat.
It had heat. Yeah.
Man, that thing was sweet.
What's crazy? I think I got that at dirt cheap too.
Wow.
Like it wasn't like I
that's
was.
where
like,
most of your stuff's from.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
My house is sponsored by Dirt Cheap.
That and
yeah.
have y'all been to Ollie's yet?
Mm-hmm.
It's hit or miss though, because there's not like, to me, there's not the quality of stuff that you can find at Dirt Cheap at Ollie's.
But it's more organized at all.
Yeah. No,
It's a
that's
lot more
it's
organized.
definitely got that going for
Yeah.
it. But like we've found some stuff at Dirt Cheap that it was like, how did this end up here?
Yeah.
And then I'm about to pay $5 for it.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Yeah.
Are they the ones where like it's missing a button or
Sometimes.
the like polo horses backwards on the shirt or something like that?
It could
Yeah,
be. Most of the time, it's
knockoffs?
like
Yeah.
from
One
a
sleeve
store
shorter than
that's
the
like
other
a return
Yeah.
or
Okay.
They do have some defective stuff.
Yeah.
yeah. I've got quite a few defective things from
For
there.
me, though, that would not deter me from buying that.
Oh gosh,
no.
no!
Like if my polo horse is upside down, that's a
Yeah.
conversation piece.
Get out! Yeah, get after it.
Like,
Get after it.
Like
I'm
this is
definitely getting
that
that.
limited edition.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
That's
You don't
it.
know about this one?
Yeah.
This is This is the Kanye
This
polo.
is
Yeah.
pre-release.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Preachers and sneakers better watch out.
That's it, baby.
Yeah. Yeah, that's man. God,
Yeah.
there was some good times that were there, but then there was also some like, oh man,
Yeah.
like why?
Yeah. There were times that we both just kind of looked at each other and without saying anything, you could tell the other one was thinking like, why am I here again?
Yeah,
Like, what,
yeah.
what? Why did the Lord send me?
Yeah. What just happened?
Or did the Lord send me
Yeah,
here? Or
yeah.
did I just have a bad
Is
lunch
this
that day?
hell?
Like Joan and the whale.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
As-
We were in the belly of the whale the entire time.
Got to be
we worked
refined by
there.
fire.
That's it,
Well,
man.
and what was crazy is when we'd be in staff meetings and we'd just be
Oh,
like
man.
instant messaging.
messaging.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like somebody would say something and we'd just be like, that's BS. or whatever. Or like,
Or somebody would be about to say something and Josh would like message me what they're about to say.
Oh, yeah.
Because see,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
had more experience there than I did. So he kind of knew what to
Yeah.
expect. He would like message me before a
Yeah.
particular person would say something. And then they would say it. I'd just be like, what just
Like he's got the
happened?
transcript
yeah.
somehow
It's
beforehand.
that gift of prophecy.
Like,
That's what it
baby.
is.
That's it. That's it, man.
Because
So I
they
know
were-
you did like sound and audio.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so what
Yeah,
were you
so
at,
I was
at
the
that
ministry
church?
director.
Okay.
So,
What is that so vague?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So basically, I was responsible for every area of ministry and ensuring that people were able to get plugged in,
Okay.
new members, class, and pretty much whatever else
Yeah.
they asked me. I mean, I ended up like most of the time recording parts for the choir
Oh,
with
yeah.
Lucky.
Yeah, David Lucky.
Yeah.
Well, so that was after my time
Oh,
because
yeah, that's right.
I got
That's right.
fired so that they would have enough money to bring him on, the new worship pastor.
Yeah. Yeah. Awkward silence.
That was a fun. Yeah. And if anybody can figure out what having a pastor's heart means,
Let us know.
Yeah.
yeah, because
Let us know.
that was my exit interview.
Yeah.
Was
Send your emails to I don't have it. at gmail.com.
yeah. Gosh.
Yeah, it was fun though. I mean, staff,
yeah.
there were some fun moments. Staff meeting, just try not to make eye contact with one another. And,
Yeah, because you knew you were going to just bust out laughing.
and if you spent 5 minutes in a room like where you have to be serious, and I know you know with Josh, like it is impossible.
I can't imagine him in a
Yeah.
staff
Oh
meeting.
my gosh.
It was so much fun for me.
Yeah.
My goal for you, and then there was
Man.
another person that we were kind of in cahoots with, was like in a staff meeting, my goal was to make somebody just bust out laughing
man.
at a moment where you shouldn't be laughing.
Yes, and that
Like,
was the thing. Like,
Hey, 3 people just died in a car crash, and then I'm like,
yeah.
can you laugh? Can you laugh right now? It would be hilarious.
But here's my thing: like, Josh has this ability, this innate ability to like crack the most hilarious joke and then have a stone cold killer's face.
Oh
like,
yeah.
like nothing ever happened. Like it's crazy. I kind of wish I had started The Office when we were working together.
oh yeah.
Like if we would have been watching The Office together, like I think we would have saw a lot of parallels between
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
That's why that show
characters
was
in
so
The Office
popular.
Yeah.
and characters that we
In the
work with.
ministry.
Yeah, in the
Yeah.
ministry.
That's
Yeah.
how the Office
Gosh.
became the Office. Everybody
Oh,
knew
yeah.
a Stanley. Everybody
I've got
knew
a-
of
I've-
yeah.
That's true.
I've got
This
a
is
really
true.
good in my head that I'm not going to say out loud,
Yeah.
but I'm going to tell you afterwards.
Okay.
There we go.
A good parallel, because just in case somebody listens to this,
Right.
it's-
They're gonna know.
yeah, they're going to
Yeah.
know exactly, and I'm not going to feel good about it after they
Mm.
text me. But
Yeah. Mm.
gosh, yeah, good
Good
times.
times.
Yeah,
Good
and then we'd be
times.
sitting in the office taking our nap, enjoying our afternoon,
Yeah.
and then somebody would be having like a really bad day,
Man.
and then just crank worship music,
Oh yeah.
just like obnoxiously loud.
Mhm.
And like we're all
Yeah.
Christians here. Like
Yeah.
I love worship music,
That's
but
right.
Yeah.
not when somebody else is trying to take a nap.
That's right.
man.
It's so inconsiderate.
It's very
And how
inconsiderate.
can I pray for you when I can't even hear my own thoughts because Carrie
Yeah.
Job is
yeah,
Yeah.
Carrie Job's
permeating
singing.
my mind.
It was so loud.
I've got
Yeah.
a pretty funny take on Carrie Job that I can't say on here. But
Sounds like the outtakes, the outro. For this
yeah,
is gonna be-
Yeah.
I've never said what I'm talking about to somebody, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. I agree
Yeah.
with you." They're
Yeah.
all just like, "What?"
Oh, yeah.
But we'll talk about it
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
It was funny
We've often thought about having a separate podcast that
A
never
secret one?
airs.
because both
That's
of our
just-
wives watched this.
Yeah. Yeah. Our wives
Or
watch this one. So.
you create the separate podcast and you just don't name yourselves and just
Change your voices.
Yeah. Do a voice change.
Honestly, I think that one would be a hit.
Have like all the lights off and it's like the big shadow over your face that's real black that you can't see.
But then our wives still figure out who we are.
Who you are.
Oh yeah.
Because of course a wife would, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Especially if you're talking about something she just did.
Yes.
I mean, like, obviously that's you.
Yes.
We just release them a year after we filmed them.
Delayed release.
Yeah.
That'll be good. That'll be good. But yeah, that time, you know, every time I think back to those moments that we had serving together in ministry, like the silver lining of it all is like we're still friends now.
Oh,
you know what I'm saying? Like those connections were formed.
Mm-hmm.
We're still living in community. And so that was a real positive from that time.
Absolutely. And I felt the same way. And me and you have had a lot of conversations after that, and whenever I would be going through something in life, I felt like I would reach out to you a good bit. We'd go eat lunch at what was the place on 15th? We were really big on Japanese food.
Oh man,
Ichiban,
yeah,
for some cheap, just
oh my gosh,
with no telling how many times
good.
we ate Hokkaido while we were on staff. Though, even though I was making $250 a week.
Yeah,
like probably 50% of my paycheck.
Listen,
went
to
Hokkaido.
that's what I was about to say. More than a large portion of our weekly earnings went to lunch.
Yeah. Never ate in the office, I don't think. And if one of us did, it would be like, come on now, come on.
Or one would bring. Oh, what about the times where we were like fasting, and then we walk in with like a can of lentils or something like that, and then the other would be like, "Are you serious?"
Which really
bring in a bunch of pita bread.
Which really, let's be honest, I was never the one fasting. It was just, it would be you fasting.
I wasn't gonna put you out there.
No,
I was
I'm
not
fine
gonna
with
put it
that.
out there.
I'm fine with that. I'm not a big faster. Like, me and God can talk to each other on a full stomach. Like, I don't need that breakdown.
Man,
but there's plenty of theological reasons to do it.
Yeah,
but that's funny.
Yeah, that's just
we can talk on a full stomach.
That's it.
That's funny.
That's good. That's good stuff.
My stomach
inaccurate,
doesn't deter me from talking to God. But anyways,
but yeah, there's been times that we've just like the word says, just iron sharpening iron, just reaching out to one another, living in community, and it's created like a beautiful friendship. And now our wives work together, which is really
that is
crazy.
Weird.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Cool. Yeah, she said something one time about she was like, "Oh yeah, Coretta," and I was like, well, I know
not many of those floating around.
Yeah, it's not the right. It might be.
It's like I know two. Yeah, King and Corey's wife.
Exactly. And like I'm only really friends with one of them. Right. So, but yeah, man, that was like, and some of the things that have happened throughout the years, me and you have had like some pretty frank discussions about like within our own lives. I felt like in some of the not darkest times, but some of the lower moments of life, we've had like some really good discussions, and one of us will bump the other one up, and that was one of the big reasons we wanted to have you on the podcast this week.
Yeah, man.
Is there's some really heavy stuff going on right now out in the world, and really to our audience, we wanted to be able to communicate that in a way that is not biased. It's not overloaded on one side or the other, and it's just like bringing some light to some things that people like us haven't had to experience. Or
because if you're not trying to seek out different perspectives on stuff, you're never going to grow or like gain anything. If you just, the people you talk about important stuff with are exactly like you.
Yeah.
That's fine. You need that too. But also like, if you're not trying to hear what other people have to say, not saying you have to believe it or agree with it, but just to at least hear. It's like,
me and Lee have gotten some heated discussions before about different topics because we don't feel the same on a lot of like some issues.
Talk about Crispitos.
No,
because those are the grossest thing in the
Crispitos
world.
being the best lunch.
Ugh.
Yeah, that was.
You couldn't pay me to eat a Crispito.
It's not at the top of my list either.
You wouldn't have to pay me to eat a Crispito. I'd do it for free.
But think back. You either don't like Crispitos or you'd eat one every day.
That's right.
It's like that's it.
Yeah.
There's no like, I guess I'd eat one.
I think people feel that way about Hot Pockets too. Like, Hot
Hot
Pockets are
Pocket's
kind of.
good.
Dang, I hadn't had a hot pocket in a minute.
I hadn't had a Hot Pocket
I
in a
lived off
hot
Pockets
minute.
in college. Hot Pockets and ramen noodles, like that was.
Yeah.
Hey, I
Go
lived off
to.
that when we worked at our jobs. Like, I don't know what you're
Yeah.
talking about college.
So you were fasting for the Lord.
There was some times of fasting, but it was not by my own choice.
Not by choice,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's because my bank account said,
Yeah.
hold up,
Yeah.
hold up a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. It's like we have these vacuums and these silos that we speak into that and that speak back to us, and it's important to seek information and understanding outside of that of our immediate context, because it's like I was telling somebody on social media the other day. It's like there's two types of people that are going to usually engage you on social media of any kind. Those who are going to always disagree with you no matter what.
Yeah.
And then there's the people who are going to always agree.
Always
so like I
gas
like
you
you
up,
as a
yeah.
person.
Yep.
Yeah. And so like
Yeah.
I don't want to disappoint you or I don't want to upset you. So I'm going to like it. And without being honest with you, or there's people that are just like, well, I don't like you and I don't like what you stand for.
Yeah.
And neither one helps.
And neither one helps. And so, you know, sometimes you have to get outside of, you know, the vacuum and the silo that you're in and hear different perspectives. And that's what helps you to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's on both, because like everybody talks about how divided we are as a country on so many different things, not just race or gender or anything, but almost everything. How is the end goal not to come together?
Yeah.
Obviously, that's the end goal.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that when you will never engage with the other side other than like
You're
telling
wrong.
them they're stupid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what? That's not the point.
Yeah.
And if the goal really is to let's bring this thing back together, both sides have to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a lot of times neither side wants to.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as well, you have to have an understanding, especially from the perspective of a follower of Christ, is that like this earth is not our home.
Yeah.
And so I need to be gracious in my my dealings with fellow believers, because it's one thing that I tell my youth all the time. It's like, this is the only community that will never end.
Yeah.
Right? It's an eternal community. Like, I loved playing football in high school, but the moment I graduated, there's some teammates that I haven't talked to since.
Yeah.
You know,
I would have died for in high school. Yeah.
That's right. And then there's people who I graduated high school with that I haven't talked to. So, I mean, there's people on jobs that I've had. Like, that's why I consider it such a blessing to have lived in community with Josh, because there's been other jobs I've left that I haven't talked to those people again, right? So the world tries to create these tribes and these communities that ultimately fall apart and fail.
Right.
But in Christian community, it's eternal.
Right.
And so it's imperative that if I'm going to be living in eternity with you, I can't allow what I see and what I think and what I feel to keep me from living in Christian community with you. And so speaking to other believers that don't look like you and don't think like you, it's important, because we aren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Because we didn't purchase the salvation. We didn't purchase the eternity.
Yeah.
And so we can't prohibit or prevent other people from living in community with us forever. So it's like, hey, I might as well get to know you, brother. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Like, you know,
Or
it's
at
gonna
least
be
be able to
awkward.
tolerate
That's
you.
it. That's
Yeah.
it. You know, and so it's gonna be awkward at the you know,
At the gate.
at the water cooler, and it's like,
Yeah.
man, I remember back in 06, like I really blasted you on Twitter. You know what I'm saying? It's like, or like, or you know what I'm saying, or I you know, or completely dismiss you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
That's it. Yeah.
you know,
I feel like that happens more often than like, hey, I just straight up blasted you or whatever. It's
Yeah.
like I just dismissed everything that you had to say. I dismissed just and based on when you really dive down deep into it, nothing.
yeah,
Like I dismissed you because of nothing.
Yeah.
Like and we talked about it. I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago with Ahmad.
Yep.
With if you're at a point and you're like, as a society, we've gotten to a point that if you think just because of like the amount of melanin that's in your skin that you're superior to another person,
yeah,
like what are you doing? Like
Yeah.
you're not listening to anybody. You're not you know you don't have any facts to back that up.
Yeah.
You know you don't have any. It's just in this day and time, it's ridiculous that everything that we know that like our bodies are exactly the same.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's
right.
just like, how can you still believe
Yeah.
that that's a determining factor
That's
in
right.
anything?
And I think if you're the only thing you're looking at to hear about this stuff is social media, I'm not 100% sure. Like, all social media does is say, like, anything like this happening, it's white and black. That's why it happened. That's like, I'm not 100% sure there's that many Klansmen still out there, or like neo-Nazi. There are, obviously there are, because we're people. People do what people do. But like, to think that, because you like a couple of years ago, one of these situations happened where a white cop killed a black guy, and LeBron James tweeted that like, we're being hunted every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I know there's issues and there's stuff, but is that really
Yeah.
Is that happening that much?
Yeah. And I think to what LeBron was saying in that particular instance is what it boils down to is just being honest. Like, the system that we live in, the whole idea of the American dream, the American experiment, it wasn't set up for us in the beginning. And so when you have a people who allow sin to enter into their hearts and minds, sinful people, sinful men and women make sinful systems and structures.
Yeah,
and so we can look at it from education, right? We can look at it from
The home.
yeah, the home. We can look at, I mean, any of the, when we think about when LeBron is talking about institutions and systems, right?
Yeah.
And so there is a system in place that has allowed for the dismantling and the destruction of black bodies ever since slavery.
Yeah.
So you transition from slavery, then you transition into the reconstructive periods after slavery is abolished, where you're promised 30 acres and a mule and 40 acres and a mule that we never get. And so you get behind the idea of the history of the police, right? It kind of started with the kind of the slave catcher dynamic where, you know, you're having to bring back property, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then you transition to segregation, right? Jim Crow. And so we see throughout these periods of history where the black body has been devalued, dispossessed, and disenfranchised. And so it is kind of a perpetual system that you live in. There's a tension that that just exists to where you feel that way, even if the reality of it is in a particular moment you're not. The events happen so often that you just feel it. Prime example. So I told you guys before the podcast started that I moved into a new neighborhood, and so it's a nice area, nice neighborhood, and my neighbors are extremely friendly. They did the whole thing, brought me a bundt cake, and introduced themselves. Yeah, it was like
You said a bundt cake?
a bundt cake from Eggers.
And this is just like for half a second, I thought you said black cake.
No.
And I was like,
No, that
well,
wouldn't have went over
that's,
well.
Yeah, that's what I was like,
went over well.
well, okay.
So that's a weird way to say chocolate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I mean,
sorry. In my head, it was just for a second. But
yeah.
anyway, sorry.
And I'm not gonna lie, it tastes like a pound cake, but it said bundt cake, so I was like, okay,
there
I'm
a
gonna call it what it
difference?
is. I don't know. It might be my ignorance. But I love a good pound cake, so that's what it tastes like.
Especially from
Heck
Edgar's.
Yeah, from Eggers.
I'd eat the paper towels out of
Man,
Edgar's.
what? They are so good. So good. But yeah, so I had to sit down and have a conversation with my children because with it being a nicer area, like we're the only black family on the street.
Yeah.
There's a elementary school one street over, and the playground is open 24/7. And so in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, I need to go introduce myself to every single one of my neighbors before the week is out. Because if my son is out riding his bike, or if I'm decide to take a late afternoon jog or a walk, like I don't want to be perceived as someone who's not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
And so just having to think through those things and having to live in those realities, I think that's what LeBron is speaking to when he's talking about particularly being hunted. It's not that we're hunted by every single police officer. It's not that we're hunted by card carrying, Klans members. the kind of racist undertone and microaggression has transitioned. It's no longer the people calling you the N-word to your face, right? It's very subtle now, and it's very systemic. And so when you have incidents like Breonna Taylor a couple of weeks ago, girl in Memphis, she's sitting in her home with her boyfriend. The officers who are not identifiable, like they don't have their gear on and don't have a badge on, they broke into her home, and she's a dispatcher. Broke into her home, shot her because they were looking for somebody else, and the guy that they were looking for was already in custody in another county. But they charged her boyfriend with
because he shot back.
But if I'm thinking like, man, like if I'm in my home, and somebody comes in, you know what I'm saying? I feel like I should have a right to defend, but it's just there, man. There's so many instances.
Were
where
the cops saying they had a warrant?
Yeah, I believe so, but still, like, you know,
oh
what I'm
no,
saying? Like,
definitely
even,
not.
Even if
I didn't really think about whether they had a warrant or not. I'm thinking about it in terms of like once it's all fleshed out. So in the moment, sure, if you feel like that guy's in there and somebody's firing at you, one, I'm glad that she was killed, but I'm glad he wasn't killed. But I mean, after the fact, after you find out, like, oh man, I made a mistake. Like, I messed up. Like, we need to drop the charges against this guy because given the circumstances of it. But I think what it speaks to is just that constant state of feeling watched, feeling not welcomed, and then feeling like you don't really have a place that's going to protect you. In terms of when you look at the laws, when you look at everything that's set up, we weren't at the table. You know what I'm saying? And I was telling a brother of mine that at school, even theologically, like there's a such thing as black theology. There's womanist theology. There's Asian theology. There's Eastern theology. There's no such thing as white theology, right? There's no such thing as a theology of America, because we center that already. So it's already at the center and the heart of everything.
So that's the default.
That's the default.
Gotcha.
And so constantly feeling like you're always on the margins and you're never centered in the story of and the fabric of what's going on in the place that you were born. That I think that produces that feeling that he was talking about.
And that's crazy. The one thing that you were saying that really hit me was like in your own neighborhood where, you know, you don't want to be perceived as someone who doesn't belong there. And it's like, I've felt that in social circumstances. From like, because I was not brought up wealthy in any regard. But so being around like somebody who was wealthy, it was like, well, I don't belong here. But it wasn't it wasn't a life-threatening situation. It was a social situation. And to think that type of a circumstance still happens to where it's like, it's not just a social thing, it's a life-threatening thing. Like really, like that blows my mind.
And there's no amount of affluence that can protect you from it. It's the thing. So you look at a guy like Philando Castile who, you know, paid for school lunches for kids, you know, dressed a certain way. Because I run a summer program for young boys, and every summer we talk about how to handle encounters with the police, like how to get away from those encounters in a safe manner, you know, being respectful, following the steps, just everything that you can do to stay alive. And I made the mistake of kind of coaching them through like all of these steps that we have to take to ensure that police officers don't feel threatened by us. But what I've come to realize with some of the recent incidents is like, there's nothing we can do. You know what I'm saying? Like there is, of course you play stupid games, you get stupid prizes. So there's basic things that you can do to prevent being in altercations. But by and large, like I can't, the clothes that I wear, you know what I'm saying? Like that, there's incidents that have happened that show me like, man, that doesn't even matter. And that's the part that's hitting me the heaviest. It's like, what do I tell my son? You know what I'm saying? Like, I can dress him up in the nicest clothes, put him in the nicest car, and, you know, if somebody, you know, feels it in their heart to look past that and look through that and just see him as a threat because of the color of his skin, like that's a sobering thought to think that that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You know? And you see that with Botham Jean. You see that with, like I said, Philando Castile and other examples of people who, you know, they've taken the narrative that, oh, well, they had this criminal past or they had this criminal background or they've done this or they've done that. But these individuals, that wasn't the case. You know what I'm saying? So you're left with this reality of like, well, dang, what can I do?
Yeah.
You know?
So off of that, so we I Googled the other day, like the first one of these situations that happened like in the Common Era. So like the was his last name Brown? Hands up, don't shoot.
Michael Brown.
Michael Brown. That was August of 2014. Mm-hmm. So that's 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. In the black community, or just specifically you, because you don't represent a race, but like to you, is there a difference? Does it matter if like after a month or two of investigating something like that, and it turns out that like there was some footage we didn't know until now where the cops were justified? Mm-hmm. Does that change the thought process of the situation? Like to look back and think, because like initially most of these are like white racist cop killed a black guy. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, let's all freak out about that. That's terrible. We don't want that. But then like a month later, there's some video of the dude trying to kill the cop before that.
Yeah.
Does that change what you think about him? Or
I mean, I think that first and foremost, for me personally, just as a follower of Christ, like it doesn't matter to me whether the person came at the cop with a knife and he had to, you know, the cop had to protect himself. Yeah. It doesn't matter what the circumstance of the event is. I'm first and foremost, as a believer, I'm going to do as the word says and mourn with those who mourn. Yeah. So I'm going to mourn the loss of this image bearer. Gotcha. I'm going to mourn the fact that a mother lost a son or a daughter, a child lost a parent. Like, and I think sometimes that's where we become short-sighted in our thinking is that we don't take the time to properly mourn the loss of life. Yeah. And I think that's just become all too common, you know, for us, and we become a little bit desensitized to it. So that's what I would do first. Yeah. And that's what I always try to do first in those instances. But depending on the circumstance, I mean, if the individual has a weapon or is charging at an officer or you know what I'm saying, like I feel like, you know, the officer has the right to go home to his family, you know, and protect himself within the line of duty. But in any other circumstance where somebody's like running away or
definitely
they're, you know what I'm saying, like there's and here's the thing, like we can pick these things apart like 1,000 different ways. But at the end of the day, I think the thing that has changed in these incidents, because I went to Ferguson right after Mike Brown was killed, and we just helped the community clean up. We went to the store owner where he was supposedly, he stole a cigarillo. We went and prayed with that store owner, and we went to the police officers when they were out patrolling and you know, prayed with them too, just to kind of offer support and love. But you can make justification out of,
for sure,
you know what I'm
and
saying?
Legally right, still a dude died.
Yeah.
Like somebody lost their life.
And that's the thing. It's like no matter unless you're threatening an officer's life in a way that is lethal, right? We should have the opportunity, and when I say we, I mean everybody should have the opportunity to have their day in court. Yeah. Like arrest this person. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you have to use force to subdue them, that's cool. Right. But when it gets to the point of excessive and they're dying, and then you just see it comparatively to other instances, like, man, bro, like I had a roommate in college. The Lord has blessed me to be in a very multi-ethnic space in my life, and I thank God for that. Yeah. I've served in multi-ethnic ministries, more than one. I grew up in a small town, Alabama, with like 65% European and white people, and like that's just been my reality.
Yeah.
So my roommate, man, we're driving and he gets pulled over, and of course my first reaction is like, "Where's my wallet?" I'm putting my hands on the dash. I'm like doing all of these things, and he's like snapping, like he going off on the car, like I was not speeding. I had my foot off the gas, and it's just like, you realize the encounters are just. The way we think about it and the way we process it and the reality of it is just so different. And then you see an incident like a Dylan Roof, you know, where he goes into the church.
Yeah, in South Carolina.
Murders the parishioners, and then he gets peacefully picked up.
Evacuated from where he was,
And then you think through how these other incidents are unfolding, and then you hear like, well, what was the crime? Right? Well, what did these individuals do? Oh, they were selling bad checks, or they were selling loose cigarettes. So you're like
over that.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And so, in all honesty, that's what goes through my mind. Comparatively speaking, I'm looking at it like, well, why can't we just have our day in court? You know what I'm saying? Like, why can't we just, you know, if you're doing wrong, absolutely, you should be apprehended. You should have your day in court. But it's just like, I believe that for some officers, there is this innate fear of what I ultimately see as either, and it doesn't always have to be a hatred. Sometimes it's the unknown.
Yeah.
So like we talked about living in community. Like if I don't live in community with you, and I don't, and that's where community policing comes in.
Right.
Yeah. Like the only time an officer comes in contact with an individual shouldn't be when you're arresting them.
Yeah.
Like go to the barbershops. Go to the gyms and the churches. Like get to know the people that you're policing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And that way you can make those connections, and hopefully it can make a difference. But that's my thought process.
I love those videos that there's a ton of them now, but like where the cops play basketball, full gear, and it's I don't know. There's so many of those.
I'll say,
but
so
that's what you're talking about.
When
like
I was I'm a firefighter now.
Yeah.
And my officer who was on my truck, we were over in like a bad neighborhood, and we were like a low income neighborhood. I'm not gonna say bad, but like a low income neighborhood.
I appreciate that distinction.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
We were in a lower income neighborhood, and we were responding to a call. After the call, there was a bunch of kids that were standing outside, and it meant so much to me to see my officer who, like, we look at officers as like, okay, this guy is like, he's my captain, he's my lieutenant, he's the guy that I'm supposed to be looking up to, to figure out how I want to live my career as a firefighter. Yeah. And I mean, he stopped, and like, we're a busy truck because we're in a lower income area. So like, we're constantly getting hit with calls, but he decides, I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I'm going to engage with these kids. Yeah. He like challenged like 3 or 4 of them to a foot race.
Yeah.
And like, he was in like full turnout gear, like bunker pants and everything. And it just like, to me, it was such like a turning point in my head that was like, it's not just about the calls. Yeah. Like, it's not just about like showing up and like rendering aid to people or, you know, putting the fire out. Like, it's also about like that community aspect of things too. So,
and I think we have to filter I think this is some of the problem too. As believers in Christ, right? Mm-hmm. We have to do everything into the glory of the Lord, right?
Yeah.
That means every part of our lives, like, it is a very public expression of what we believe. Mm-hmm. The Gospel of John, he says, you know, this is how you'll know. This is how that people will know that you're my disciples, by how you love one another. Yeah. And so when I combine those two ideas, it's like, if I'm doing this into the glory of the Lord, and I want to show that I'm a follower of Christ by how I love my fellow man, I have to filter every interaction, every policy, everything about our current experience in this country. I have to filter it through the Word of God. Yeah. I have to filter it through what He says is best, because the way He set it up is what's best, not the way we set it up. And I think we get that mixed up, and we get so tribalistic and so patriotic that we tend to filter America, through the Word, through the lens of America, and instead of filtering America through the lens of the Word.
Right.
And that is where we we kind of prop up these things that we've made and created more than we prop up the economy of the kingdom
Yeah.
of God.
Yeah.
And so, because in his economy, we all have meaning. In
Right.
his economy, we all have value.
Yeah.
And so, and that's at the heart of, that's at the heart of the gospel.
And it's not a coincidence that the less and less America does that, the worse stuff's getting.
Absolutely.
That's not a coincidence.
Absolutely. You're
And so
absolutely right.
If you have no reason to value life other than we came from amoebas and we're going to just turn back into dirt.
Yeah.
Like if that's your thought process, you're not going to care about life that much.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so,
And that's why, I think sometimes I get frustrated with individuals who are like myself or are pro-life, that we kind of fall short and it's like pro-birth. You know what I'm saying? Like we want life to be born, but it's like, what about after that?
right.
So is it from the womb to the tomb, or is it just you get here and it's like, oh, okay, you're on your own. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps, kind of do your, we're not going to put the things in place to show that we really, truly love and care and going to and nurture your soul until the Lord comes to get you. It's just like, oh, great. You had the kid, and it's like, but it's like, I want my life to matter throughout the entire existence of the time that I'm living in community with fellow believers. And that's why sometimes the silence is a little deafening. Like if I'm being completely honest, man, like I look at some of my brothers and sisters who are just being silent about some of these things, and it's like, whoa, man.
Yeah.
Like but then as soon as we see like riots or looting or things like that, it's
That's
like
when you decide to speak
you
up.
want to speak up then, and it's like, well, why didn't you speak up for this?
Yeah.
This brother?
Preventative, not
exactly.
reactive.
Yeah, exactly.
Like let's fix some of this stuff beforehand the situations can happen.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that me personally, I wouldn't, I wouldn't loot or or participate in anything like that. But I understand.
If Best Buy's wide open, I might slide in and get me a PS5. You know what I'm saying?
We might have to go to Edgar's and get us a pound cake, a butt cake.
If they're looting Edgar's, I mean, what's some flour and some sugar to those people? Slide in there and get.
That's such a slippery
cake.
slope way to think about that.
I'm just
Target
it's a
can
joke.
handle it.
It's a joke.
And
I'm kidding.
But then you think about it too, like when I talked about us propping up our own kind of systems and the things that we made, like. This is why I'm not going to publicly condemn any of these individuals, because I know what it's like to protest, to march, and to not be heard.
Yeah.
I know what it feels like to talk about some of the societal ills and just be completely ignored. And so, as Dr. King says, is that riots and protests is the language of the unheard. It is that it is not.
But it's still peaceful for MLK, right?
He's talking about riots.
Yeah.
He's talking about protests, and then because he makes this example of, think about American history, some of the greatest movements, and moments of change that we have had.
It's not some of them; it's all of them.
All of them, have come from moments of like Boston Tea Party or the different wars. Like it has come out of these moments of fury and righteous indignation. You look at some of the Old Testament texts, where, there is, where God is enacting justice on behalf of a people, and says, all right, well, I'm gonna let them capture you, or I'm gonna allow you to go in and plunder, to plunder this people. Now, of course, we live under grace now, but there are times even in this country that where riots and protests have occurred, that progress has been made out of that. You know what I'm saying? And so you look at a people who are despised, disinherited, and dispossessed. It's like they feel like they have no other option. And so I think we look to the root causes of that. You don't blame what's done in the dark. Like if I turn my lights off in my room and I send my kids in there to go find something, if they knock over a lamp or if they, mess up something while they're in the dark, I can't blame that on them. I created the darknch. You know what I'm saying? And so people are experiencing some dark times in their lives. They're like, man, we've screamed, we've shouted, we have marched, we have cried out, and no one has heard our cry. And so we're at this place of hopelessness and frustration, and we're taking it out in this way. And ultimately, guess what? Target will be rebuilt. You know what I'm saying? The life of that company will live on. But George Floyd, he can't come back. You know what I'm saying? The next person that it happens to, white or black, can't come back. And so that's why I'm hesitant to demonize those folks, because man, it's a hurting place.
Yeah,
it's a hurting place.
And so this is a little off topic, but in a similar strain. You were talking about pro birth.
Yeah,
it feels like we're pro birth. I had an awakening like a year or two ago where it was, anytime somebody talks about, hey, if somebody comes in my house, I'm shooting them. It's like, okay, but like what, like, are you really pro-life then? Like, I mean, if somebody comes, like, maybe that person, like, and I don't want any harm to come to me or my family and or nothing like that. But at the same moment, like, if that person is in that state of doing what they're doing, like, I'm a Christian already. Like, I know where I'm going. I know I don't have anything to fear after this.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm going to take their life away, which in turn they could have, like, in prison, they could get up with like Church of the Highlands prison ministry, and then their life gets changed. And so it's like, it's a weird, it's a different, like, where it's like, it's are you pro life or are you just pro or anti-abortion?
Man, we grew up in the country, bro. Like, we're good shots.
Yeah.
I can, what I'm saying?
Shotgun, you don't need to be too good.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm thinking about it in terms of my aim. Like, where am I aiming at when this guy's coming in? Am I aiming for the head? Am I trying to disarm him and disable him? Or am I trying to kill? And then, like, why is there such an excitement about it? Sometimes when we talk about it, it's like, man, if you break in my house,
I can't wait.
You know what I'm saying? It's like a, we have this fascination with death and with the weapons of destruction, and it's just like, man, you know what I'm saying? What happened to grace and truth? You know what I'm saying? Like, what happened
if it was Jesus in that situation? Like, I mean, we filter everything through what would Jesus do? Like, in that situation, you think Jesus is going to take the life of somebody else?
Put the ear back on the guy.
When Peter cut it off.
Yeah,
exactly.
And then, but he's balanced also in that. He's going to offer you grace and truth. So I think about the woman who's caught in adultery, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he reaches down and he talks to the protesters and says, ye without sin cast the first stone. And that was the grace part of it, right?
Yeah.
But then there's the truth. It's like he looks at her after that and says, "Woman, where are your accusers?" And she said, there are none, Lord. Then he gives her the truth. He says, "Go and sin no more."
Yeah.
And so I think that is the antidote. That is the bomb, so to speak, for a lot of our divides that we're experiencing right now. Is we have to have grace and we have to have truth. Yeah. And I think what happens is, where I think a lot of people who think and look like me get frustrated, is there's so much grace, but there's not a lot of truth telling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you want us to be gracious in our response. You want us to be gracious in the way we handle these situations, but there isn't a lot of truth telling. It's not like people aren't speaking the truth to power. People aren't calling these things out. You know what I'm saying? In a way that is going to create the incremental change that we need to see for us to stop losing our lives and losing dignity. And so it's like, we just want both. We want the grace and we want the truth to be told, because you can't fix something if you don't realize that it's a problem.
Yeah.
And so it's a disservice to me and my brothers in Christ if I don't graciously tell them the truth.
Yeah.
That it's like, hey man, this is an issue. This is a problem.
Yeah.
This is, and not blaming you, but you can be a part of the solution. Yeah. And if you're not going to be a part of the solution, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like,
but,
even if you don't create the problem.
So what I was while you're saying all that, agree for sure. But so like, we're saying grace and truth, it's all funneled through Christ. That's the only way you're going to get anything done. Well, Christ isn't in the government anymore. Mm-hmm. And so like, how effective could any government program be, or social justice movement, if Christ isn't at the center of it? Like, so what are we going to get done if, like, they're not speaking truth because they don't know the truth, because we don't have the truth. We don't care about the truth anymore. Mm-hmm. It's turned from, we're not a country now based off of Judeo-Christianity.
So Proverbs states that, the heart of the king is in the Lord's hands. He turns it whichever ways he wills. Yeah. And so if we believe in the sovereignty of God, and we believe that he is, omnipresent and he's omniscient, all-knowing, then we can faithfully right? Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's,
Yeah.
and render unto God what is God's.
Definitely.
The way that he set this thing up in the Old Testament was that the people of God would be the example to the rest of the world. Right. And so even if there's just a remnant here in America who is fighting for justice, who is walking humbly before the Lord, and who is doing the things of the Lord, that is all our requirement is. Right. And I think that's the scary part for believers, is that loss of control. Yeah. Think about the situation that God in his sovereignty placed Christ in, the reality that he placed him in to execute justice for himself. Because think about this, that's all. Christ's mission was justice for God. Yeah. God had to have penance for our sins. He had to have justice, and he used his own son to execute that justice. Right. But think about the people that he placed him in to do that with, the Jewish people. They were an oppressed people. They were a marginalized group. They were the Roman government was not kind to this people. Right. One of Clayton Cullerton, who is a white minister at my church, he preached today, and he talked about the artifact that has just been found with the money from the Roman government during that time. And of course, they had a picture of Caesar on one side, but on the flip side of the coin, it has a picture of a Roman soldier with his foot on the neck of a Jewish man. And that's what they had to, that's what Jewish people had to look at every single day. Yeah. But God in his sovereignty chose to bring Christ through this lineage, not to overthrow the government, but to show us two things. One, there's a better economy and there's a better way, right? Because he lived it. It's not like he was just some lofty savior who sat up high and orchestrated these things from heaven. He came down and was God among us. So we have a living, breathing example, right? That despite what our government does, we as a people can do right. Yeah. We as God's people can do what thus says the Lord. And guess what? God will protect us. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? God will cover us, and he will do what only he can. There's some things that only he can do. Yeah. But when we do those things, that's why it says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, right? Yeah. Then I'll hear from heaven and I'll heal the land. So we have a living, breathing example of Jesus, who had to navigate government, had to navigate being someone who was oppressed and dispossessed in that people group. And then we also have the example of the after effects of that, right? So there's always going to be oppressive systems. There's always going to be regimes. There's always going to be evil systems. Because like I said before, we're sinful people. You know what I'm saying? So we create sinful
Ultimately, this is not going to get fixed until Jesus comes back.
And so I don't think it should be our expectation that we automatically have to have a dominant system to live in that is comfortable for us to practice our express faith. But what we have to do is trust that God has done it before in himself, in his personhood of Christ, and know that if we do it, then God is with us, and that ultimately we're going to be on the right side of this thing. And then you have to constantly remind yourself, this is not my home. Right. Yeah. This is not my home. When I speak truth to power, when I love my neighbor as myself, when I am living in community with other people who don't look like me, and I'm mocked or I'm chastised for it, or people say, well, you just don't get it. This is not my home. Yeah. This is not my home, but I'm about my Father's will, right? Yeah. I'm doing the things that I feel like in my heart of hearts, through prayerful consideration, that God would be honored by. Yeah. And then I'm looking towards a present help, but a future hope. Yeah. And that when Christ returns, it's gonna work itself out. And this is the thing that I would love for.
You can turn your ringer off, John.
I don't know how to turn the ringer off of every single. I don't know what's going on. All right, sorry.
You received an email from X Ministry.
Yeah, for real.
Hey, we heard what you said.
What you said.
Edgar's called. Yeah, Edgar's. You better not loop on the store.
This is the legal representation from Edgar's Bakery. You've incited a riot against our establishment.
Gosh, dude,
we're on the way. We're on the way.
Have I done it on you? I think I did. I've started to do, and it's supposed to be funny, but like if I'm talking about something that's kind of like a touchy issue or gray area, I'd be like, Google that. I was just kidding. That wasn't me. That was Josh.
So a funny situation about that is my older brother. He is also a fireman, and he's like a hazmat guru, right? And when Obama went to Selma a couple years back, anytime that the president goes anywhere, they have to have hazmat groups
sweep
on
the area.
scene.
They got everything.
Yeah.
Just in case something were to happen, they've got a designated place they can go to.
Yeah.
And so I was talking to my brother on the phone, asking him about it, and he was telling me about all the protocols and everything. I said, do you think they're listening to your phone right now?
Definitely.
And he said, there's a good chance. And so I said, assassinate, bomb, and just started going like,
Oh my gosh.
just like, I just kept saying
he freak out?
stuff. He just hung up the phone. I was like,
I was gonna say he probably didn't freak out. He knows you, like he knows you.
yeah,
to a
but
T.
still, like, that's just,
You
you
walked up
shouldn't
to
give
the
me that
line.
information.
You
It's
walked
just-
up to the line and then frog leaped past.
Oh,
it.
yeah.
I was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
chloroform, whatever.
It wouldn't
just,
be Josh
gosh.
if he didn't, though, right?
Right.
yeah,
that-
that's
yeah.
true.
Josh.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the thing that, like, going back to what we were talking about, like living in community, how do we see these things? Like, allyship for what is right is always going to cost us something.
For sure.
That is our sacrifice of worship,
Yeah.
right? Not what we say, not how we throw our hands in the air, but in a Sunday service, but in moments of tension, in moments of strife and grief for our fellow brothers and sisters of Christ, can we stand in the gap?
Yeah.
That's what Christ did for us.
Yeah.
We were drowning, sinking in sin,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so
Already sunk, not
that's
drowning.
right.
We were
Yeah,
already dead.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so he inserts himself into this uncomfortable position, into this marred situation, and he does what is right, even though it's going to cost something.
Yeah.
Right, because the empire demanded power instead of righteousness. It demanded its own power and authority over the life and the value of all God's creation.
Yeah.
That's how Christ ends up hanging on that cross.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and so it costs him something. So we can't think that reconciling to one another isn't going to cost us something.
Yeah.
If it costs Christ everything to reconcile us back to God,
Right.
it's going to
Yeah.
cost us a little something. So it's going to it is a risk sometimes
Yeah.
to be agents of reconciliation.
And that's
You
that's
know?
where it goes from, because from everything we've been saying and just common sense looking at it, the healing that needs to take place is going to be a personal, like, one-on-one, then another one-on-one, then two-on-two. Like, it's not, there's no law you can pass. There's no program you can set up there.
Yeah.
That's not going to do it. It's got to be personal and individual.
Yeah.
And that's the right, accurate, healthy way to do it. It's just it's long and hard and is I just
Yeah.
said long and hard. But yeah, like
Yeah.
Jesus, let's just call him the best Christian of all time, strongest, whatever. He got 3 years of work in as being God in flesh, and he converted 12 dudes, well, 11, because no, I guess then they brought in Matthias as the 13th,
Yeah.
but now he's 12. So 12 people, and then you see in Acts after Christ is crucified and then raised from the dead, when they're in the upper room in Acts, is it 50 people? That's not a bunch.
Yeah.
And so it's slow and it's individual, and you're not going to heal any racial division without it's one-on-one. It's done one relationship at a time.
Yeah. What do you feel as believers and people that might be listening to the podcast or just anybody? What do you think for us would be steps that we can help? I mean, I know we talked about, like we were saying, grace and truth, and we were saying standing in the gap. Like, what is there things that we can actively
Action
do?
steps.
Yeah, action steps to maybe help the situation, reconcile some things, speak life into it. I mean, is there something that we can do physically that can help the situation?
Yeah. I think to start living in community with people that don't look like you,
Just
don't
meld
think like
together.
you,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Be
I mean,
around
like,
other people.
to appreciate and to celebrate the beauty of the diversity that God has created.
Yeah.
And so 'cause that's why I kind of,
Beyonce.
yeah, that would be easy, right?
Yeah.
It'd be easy to live in community with Beyonce.
Yeah.
But I mean, I kind of cringe when people say, well, I don't see color. It's like,
that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, it's just like, well, man, then you don't see me.
Yeah.
Because God in his infinite creativity and his sovereignty chose to make me
You're not
a man of
accidentally
color.
dark.
Right. And it's like, I want you to see who I am and in the way that God created me.
Yeah.
And I want you to appreciate it and celebrate it just as much as I appreciate and celebrate the diversity.
NASCAR.
Man. What?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I learned a lot. No, for real. Like Josh would talk about NASCAR a lot. And I started watching NASCAR because of our conversations that I had. And there's some things that he talked about that I would like never in a million years watch or do. Same. You know what I'm saying? But like there's some things like he doesn't appreciate the beauty of, I don't feel like Hank Williams Jr. like I do. Like, but that's okay. You know what I'm saying? Like
Hey,
when I started singing Dinosaur in the middle of our office, sometimes he'd just be like, oh gosh.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on.
No, but for real, in all seriousness, like that living in community like that is what helps you understand. It's what helps you. It stretches you. And so that's one thing. And you can do it in an organic way.
Oh, definitely. It has to be.
And it has to be done through prayerful consideration. It's not going to stick if it's forced. That's right. It can't be fake and phony. Like pray about this. Like, Lord, show me some individuals that will graciously allow me to walk alongside them and see how they live. They can see how I live, and we can understand one another better. That's the individual things one of the individual things that we can do. But from a systemic level, from a larger perspectives, like I feel like there's some things that we can dismantle. Like if I know that something that I have been a part of, worked with, and lived under is hurting people, is like, because it's easy for us to sit back and say that we're okay with something if it doesn't affect us. Yeah. But for the people that it is like harming and that are like really living under it, like, so you can you can personally call your district attorney. You can personally call your police chief. You can call your mayor, because guess what? We voted these people in. Right. They are accountable to the people. Right. And so
supposed to be.
That's supposed to be, right. And so, and then guess what? Once we make our wishes known in terms of the expectations for public servants, and they don't meet them, we vote them out. Yeah. That's what it looks like living in community with people that are marginalized. When you see that there's something that's not right, let's address it. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, and we do it with other things, y'all. Like, we attack systems wholeheartedly in other areas. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can revert, like, we can't dismantle it altogether, but we can reverse things. Yeah. Like, if we know that there is, but it takes some listening. Yeah. Because if it doesn't affect you, then you can just easily ignore it, right? So, but if you're living in community with others that don't look like you, you become aware of their realities. Yeah. And then you learn more and more the ways that you can help and the steps that you can take. And then, as well as that, when you start to live in community with them in that way, you start to realize the beauty of that community and what you've been missing. Yeah. Because there are some things, man, that have come out of our conversations and living life with you, man, that I would have never gotten had we not taken the opportunity to get to know one another and to continue to build on those relationships. Yeah. Because there's been times where you and I have flat out disagreed on stuff. Yeah. There's been times where we were just on completely opposite ends of the spectrum, but we were always gracious to one another, and we stuck in there with it. Yeah. And it cost us something. Yeah. It cost us time. It cost us effort, ego. We had to put pride aside. Yeah, man. Like, it just, and we had to realize that at the root of it, like, this is my brother in Christ. Yeah. And like, I love this individual. But see, now that we got to a certain place, there's an expectation that I have of you now. And it's like, I would put it on the line for you. Yeah. Like, are you gonna put it on the line for me in terms of speaking up, speaking out, and doing what you can? So living in community with people, right, that don't look like you. And here's the thing: there's gonna be some rejection with that, man. Yeah,
and that's okay. I mean,
and that's
that's what's gonna happen.
That's what's gonna happen, man.
We're on broken people on a broken planet.
Well, people are not gonna be okay with that.
I mean,
you know?
there's differences in personal preference that like it's just not going to line. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to try and force a relationship with somebody who it's like,
well, you're not
so
friends with every
vastly-
white person on the planet.
Oh,
You know what
God,
I'm saying?
no.
Like, you know, and so
I'm not friends with some of my family.
but there are people, and just because I don't like the things that you like, just because I don't, does not mean that I have the that I can just dismiss your story and not hear you.
Yeah.
You can still be heard.
Yeah.
And some people you can hear and not live in community with them. Other people you're going to be blessed to live in community with, and it's going to be fruitful for both of you.
You know what I think's hurt us a lot, and we've talked about this from so many different aspects because it's like mass media. We're talking about this close-knit community. There were still a ton of racial problems back in the day, but like if we didn't have social media and stuff, and you're putting most of your effort, like the new neighborhood you're in, where it's y'all and then a bunch of white people. That's a lot easier to make those relationships and fix those issues. And like once your neighbors know what your kids look like and that your wife can cook something great, and like when we come over to dinner, she cooks that. That's so much easier to do. But now, even if you're trying to do those things and you turn your phone on and there's riots and protests, it creates, at least I think it does, it creates just like, maybe my neighbors don't like me that much.
Yeah.
Maybe this isn't real.
Yeah.
And so the idea of now we can know anything about anything that ever happens, there's no way to build those personal relationships that we have to fix these problems without having everything else tainting it.
Yeah. And that's why I said it's two things. We just have to be informed by the right things. So I'm informed by my faith in what I believe the word says. And then the second thing too, I think about that a little bit differently in terms of like it changes the tide of the coverage though, in that it exposes some of the evils that would have otherwise been hidden.
Yeah.
Very true.
Had the masses not known. Like in the turning, one of the major turning points of the civil rights movement was Emmett Till's death. And so he was so mangled beyond description that a lot of people were telling his mother, like, no, don't lift this boy's casket up. People don't need to see him like that. And she said, yes, they do.
Yeah.
She said, people need to see the horrors that go on. People need to see how this has affected our family and what this particular evil has done and how it's affected us. And so I kind of think like, man, well, what if there were no cell phone cameras?
Yeah.
Like how many of these incidents would not have, because the prosecutors in Georgia with Ahmaud Arbery, they weren't gonna but until the video came out and they saw like, man, this boy is running away from these cats. He runs around the truck. Like he's not engaging. That's when the time. And so sometimes I'm thankful for it. And it's just like anything else that God gives us. Any other tool, it can be used for good or it can be used for evil.
Absolutely.
But at times, I agree, it does have the potential to create presuppositions and biases against other people that maybe we wouldn't have had. But when we're doing this type of work that we're talking about doing, work of reconciliation and work of healing, it is my thought that a lot of it needs to be done in private. So when I'm engaging, now I can speak truth to power and put things on my social media that cause attention to certain ills and evils, but like I've gotten to the place now that when I'm on social media engaging people, I'm going to always leave them with an invitation to get together personally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? Because sometimes
that's where life change happens.
That's
context
it.
of relationships.
That's it. And a lot of times people are so prideful that they won't receive anything over social media in terms of like gentle correction or like honesty. Like they don't, it's because it's for the world to see and you get a little defensive. But when you sit down and have that cup of coffee, when you sit down and have lunch and you get to look a person in the eye and say, you know, and you may walk away from the table and still not agree, but at least you have a better understanding of one another and where each other is coming from. So I think social media it can be bad when there's a lot of misinformation put out there. And also too, I think it causes people not to do the work of understanding the historical and all the points, because that was the next thing I was going to say. Live in community with people. Do the little things like challenging the systems that were created and that are hurting people. Challenge those systems, right? And then the third thing is do your homework. Do the research, man.
Due diligence.
Do your due diligence. Like come into it informed, you know, and from the other person's perspective.
Yeah.
Because you already know your own.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, and that's another thing about being a minority in this country. Like, we learn about the history of America and the history of the majority at every single turn.
Yeah.
Like, when I go into a courthouse and I look at the markers and everything that it reads, when I look around town, the city, architecture, or these walking trails, and when I read the history, it doesn't include me. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So I'm forced to learn the majority history. Yeah. But oftentimes we do each other a disservice because we're not diverse in the fact that we're learning other people's history as well and their contributions. And so, like, learn what the theology of the Black church, what it was born out of, where it came from. Like, learn about your Hispanic brothers and sisters, your Asian brothers and sisters, their history, how they came to the understandings that they came to and what their realities are like, and then you can come prepared. It's just like college, y'all. Like when before you
study for a test.
That's right. Yeah. Well, even bigger than that. Like I was a social work major, and before I got into my social work classes, I had prerequisites. I had to take math 202. Yeah. I had to take biology. I had to take like there's prerequisites to my social work courses. Yeah. So there's prerequisites to understanding the history of race in America and racial reconciliation. And so there's some amazing books out there that your listeners can dig into. The Color of Compromise by Jamar Tisby. Lecrae did a foreword for that one. You got some work by Austin Channing Brown that you can check out. And let me see. Let me get the exact name of it. It's I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness. And then you got Brian Loritz, who's a multi-ethnic pastor. It's called Insider Outsider, My Journey as a Stranger in White Evangelicism and My Hope for Us All. Like there's some.
Have you read The Third Option?
Who is that by?
McGahee or something? He's a what's the way to say it?
Multi-ethnic pastor.
A
pastor of a multi-ethnic
his
church.
Mom's white and his dad's black.
Okay.
That's
he's
interracial.
Interracial. Sorry. Yeah. So McMagnus or something.
Okay.
Or his dad's like option. The Third Option.
Okay.
It's really good.
The book. Oh gosh, they just made a movie out of it. Had
the
Michael B. Jordan and.
The Black Panther bad guy.
You're talking about Brian Stevenson, Just Mercy.
Just Mercy.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, man.
Yeah, man.
That opened my eyes, like looking at that book, like, and we've even talked about that book on this podcast where I think it was up until it was the early 90s where in the state of Alabama, it was still legal or illegal for interracial marriages. And it was like, it was a thing that I thought was so far in the past. And then realizing that it was right up on me. Absolutely. It was like, well, that means that everything I've thought before this, where it was like it's all out there.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I'm talking about, like in terms of just being aware of like the little things that we can do to kind of autocorrect the systems that we live in and to eliminate or attempt to create fairness and equity and justice for all people. Like that's our only responsibility. Like I think sometimes we get caught up on the outcomes of what we can and can't do, and it becomes so daunting and huge. But it's like it's just these small little steps, man. And it starts with educating ourselves, right, on these topics, on these issues, and really digging into what it means to live in community with one another, and then educating those around us. So like you guys will be in rooms that I'll never be in.
And the same.
And vice versa. You know what I'm saying? But there's gonna be some moments and times where people are gonna be disparagingly talking about minorities, or they're going to be spewing some things that are either inaccurate or hurtful. Like me as a brother in Christ, it is my hope and expectation that you guys, that's your moment to speak truth to power. That is your moment to be an ally. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be, there may be a time on your job as a firefighter. You know what I'm saying? That, there's some there's some things that go on in the firehouse or on a call where you're like, man, that's just not right. In that moment.
Absolutely.
It's not the Facebook post. It's not the text saying, I love you, brother. We're one. It's not the, it's that.
Yeah.
It's in those moments where we really come together.
We're not going to get anything fixed with hashtags.
Yeah.
We're not.
Yeah. And awareness is great, but it's like, it goes beyond
like,
that.
okay, we're aware. We're like, not so that not to do it, continue to bring to light bad stuff, but like, this isn't new.
Yeah.
Let's start doing some stuff.
Yeah, man.
And I think that's where at least for me, there's some frustration with just being blanketed called racist. It's like, I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of input outside of my little circle.
Yeah.
But like, I'm not adding to the plight of minorities. And so what am I, but I'm being yelled at that you're a part of the broken system. Well, no, I'm not. I don't, what do you want me to do other than like fix specific situations? Like, hey, dude, you can't say that. Like, come on, man. But like, other than that, there's not much I can do.
Yeah, but on the other side of things, I mean, you've got to look at it from the other side of things of like, we can't be blanketed as racist, but we also can't blanket the other side as, well, it's just a bunch of looters. It's just,
definitely.
And so I think it's just, I mean, on both sides of the coin is there's issues and there's problems. And, I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily a thing that's like, oh, well, like we can fix that just like we can't fix the other, our side of things by, I don't know.
And I think sometimes the frustration is that like, you can still not be actively participating in a system or something that's hurtful or harmful and benefit from it.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So like there's certain benefits of being a part of the system where you're not actively promoting it and you're not actively engaging in it, but you're benefiting from it. And so like I think that's the shift.
Frustration on the other side.
Yeah. And so like for me as a brother in Christ to people who benefit from the system, I'm just like, man, like say something.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I'm just like I'm drowning in it over here. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it doesn't affect you. You're not doing it, but you are a part of the system that you benefit from, and I'm not, and it's hurting me.
Yeah. The rich get richer almost.
Yeah. And it's like and it's not even material. It's just like the right to exist.
Yeah.
The space to exist peacefully with equity, fairness, and justice in the same space as you do. Like, it's like, say something, do something, like act, like help us to combat it in a way that is going to be honoring to God. You know what I'm saying? And so that is it's a tough thing, man, because you, like I said, the empire from the Roman Empire to the American Empire it's gonna cost you something.
Yeah.
Speaking out and speaking up costs you something. It's uncomfortable. It may cost you prestige in certain places. It may cost you, but the cost is worth it because Christ never takes something away from us in that regard when we're doing His work without giving us something in return.
Yeah.
And when we put that time in to listen, without just to listen, even if we don't agree, just listening to the suffering of our fellow man. When we start living in community and when we take those small steps to actively engage these systems to make them aware and to create change, then the Lord, I'm telling you, man, He does things that creates community in such a special way that it blesses your life so richly, man.
Yeah.
It is a blessing to do that work, but it's hard work. It's costly work.
That's why the Christian church is so important and has been, because that's where it starts.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
This healing, because it's like if you cut your arm and you go get stitches, it heals from the bottom to the skin.
Yeah.
And so to just throw a big Band-Aid over it and say we're good, well, no. Yeah. It's got to heal from the inside, which is that community.
That's right.
And so to just say, and I'm not saying right or wrong, but just say we got to change the federal laws. Well, that doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, that didn't help way back
because we've for the most part, not we as in a certain color, but like we have the Civil Rights Act. We've got separate but equal is not a thing Separate but equal is not a thing. And there is racial undertones from both sides. I would assume. I don't. Oh, that was one of the questions I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Was like comically, if you go to a family reunion as a white person, like there's going to be that crazy uncle that's spouting off stupid stuff, and your parents are like, don't go near him.
Yeah.
Does that happen in the other direction?
In terms of a family reunion,
Or we'll just
I got
like
some crazy uncles.
but just like
we don't have enough time in the podcast to talk about crazy.
But like, there's always that one person in your family that is racist against African Americans. Like, is that the other direction from the inside of a black family? Like,
there's always that one uncle that you're like
racism
don't
towards white.
Yeah. So there is,
and this could be as funny or serious as you want. It doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure people will disagree. There will be some that will disagree, but I can explain why. You can give people my contact information. And you can at me, bro.
Yeah.
But racism involves, by definition,
superiority.
And you have to have some type of power and authority to exert over a someone who's in a more vulnerable position. Yeah. So by that definition, no, I don't think that it could happen. But stereotyping, malice, hatred, absolutely,
all the emotions of racism without the definition.
Well, it just without the without the power to execute physical or systemic harm to another person. Like, it's just. But because there's so much psychology behind it. There's a lot of older African American individuals who
grew up in the 60s.
Yeah, man, and they experienced that hurt, and they're still harboring a lot of that, and it's hard, man. And I understand it. I get it.
Does that get passed down the same way it doesn't?
Not in large mass,
because that would be our grandparents' age that grew up in the 60s.
Well, and I think we don't, as African Americans, we don't have the luxury of doing that. Like, I can't get mad at white people and say I don't want to deal with white people. I don't want to work with white people. I don't want to live in community with white people. I'd have to move.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like, as a minority, we can't take that. We can't take that posture.
You have to move somewhere like Nebraska,
or Wakanda,
North Dakota.
But you know, like it's just not. We don't have the luxury of holding on to that very long and being successful and creating a life that is nourishing to our souls and to those around us. And so, no, it just, we're not in a position to pass it on.
Yeah, I got you. So specifically to Key and Peele, those two guys, who's the one that does the movies? Is that the tall, skinny one?
Peele.
That's the tall.
No. That's the
shorter guy.
Yeah.
Okay. So like
Us and Get Out. And all that stuff. Yeah.
And
fantastic.
He has said multiple times, like, I'm not putting white people in my movies.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
And like, is that not all these arguments are the same, but like, if Tom Hanks all of a sudden said, like, I'm not doing a movie with black people anymore, they'd kill him.
Yeah.
He'd get rung up, and just like stuff like that. That's frustrating and this is coming from a middle class white dude.
Yeah.
That's frustrating that like it's cool for Peele to say that. And it's
Peele's a liar too, because his main character in Get Out was a white lady.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, there was a lot of white people in
after that when it was
but I
what's
get your
the Us one where it was like
Yeah. Oh, so let me
Yeah.
So let me explain that. So creatively, or just in general, oftentimes it is difficult for African Americans to exist apart from what is called the white gaze. So the white gaze is just like, we can't hardly do anything apart from the input, opinion, or just general gazing of white people. Like, there's literally no spaces where we can go where we're not impacted by the culture of it, or the customs and the traditions of America, right? The majority in America. And so basically what some of these artists and what some of these individuals are saying is like, I just want to create a space that is uniquely about expressing ourselves in terms of our culture and what we bring to the table without input. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, it's not to be offensive. And we know that because he's used white people in other movies. Yeah. So I can look up that adjective and be like, okay, this is not a thing against white people, because he's had to work with white people on his show, and he's put them in his
Hollywood
movies. Yeah. But it's just like, we need this space that is uniquely ours, because we don't have it. Yeah, to express. And it's just like, oftentimes sometimes people who live in the majority like don't understand that, because everything is yours. You know what I'm saying? It's
like, that's crazy. What you were saying a minute ago that I've never had to think about was when you were talking about, we don't have the luxury of saying like, oh, well, I'm just not gonna deal with these people. Like in my head, it's like I didn't even think about that being a luxury on my side. My side of the fence, it's like, well, it's a luxury because I can just go, well, I'll just go work at Billy Bob's Garage or whatever.
It's agreeing a little too heavily.
That's a good one.
I promise this is Gatorade, Joe.
Hey, if it ain't, that's on. Hey, that's fine. That's fine with us. Thanks everybody for listening, and don't forget to join us on Tuesday for part 2 of this podcast. Hopefully it has been as eye-opening for you as it was for us, and we'll see you then.